The whisper came at 3 in the morning, a time when Moscow slept and only the most dedicated government officials remained at their posts. Alexander Petrov, once among Russia's wealthiest men, now stood in the shadows of a parking garage beneath the Tverskaya district. He checked his watch, a habit from his days as a business tycoon when time meant money. Now time meant survival. His driver had vanished 2 hours earlier, presumed arrested. His security team had been disbanded by direct Kremlin order. And yet here he was, seeking a meeting that could end with his death. The air in the underground structure felt stale as Petrov pulled his coat tighter. At 62, he had survived the fall of the Soviet Union, built a fortune in the chaos of the 1990s, and managed to remain in favor with the Kremlin longer than most of his peers. But that favor had evaporated 3 weeks earlier when he had questioned the president's new economic policy at a private gathering of industrialists. Footsteps echoed across the concrete, and Petrov tensed. A figure emerged from behind a concrete pillar, Mikhail Kovalev, once deputy director of the FSB and now officially retired. The men did not shake hands. "You have 5 minutes, Kovalev said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My presence here alone could mean a death sentence." "What I have to share will take longer than 5 minutes, Petrov replied, reaching into his coat. Kovalev flinched, hand moving toward what was surely a concealed weapon, but relaxed when Petrov produced only a small flash drive. "This contains evidence of a plot against the president," Petrov said. "Not from the West, not from Ukraine, but from within his own government. His own people." Kovalev's expression remained impassive, but his eyes betrayed interest. "Why come to me with this? You could have taken it directly to the Kremlin." Petrov gave a bitter laugh. "And walk into the den of those who want me silenced. 3 of my associates have already died in accidents this month. I need someone with connections who isn't directly implicated. Someone who still has the president's ear." Kovalev took the drive, turning it over in his gloved hands. "If this is some attempt to regain favor by fabricating a conspiracy." "It's not fabrication," Petrov interrupted. "Everything on that drive is authentic. Communication logs, financial transfers, meeting records. They've been planning this for 18 months. The operation is called Sleeping Giant." The former FSB deputy slipped the drive into his pocket. "Who?" "Defense Minister Baranov is coordinating. General Yegorov provides military backing. Deputy Prime Minister Sokolov handles the political angle. At least 7 oligarchs are funding it." Kovalev's eyes narrowed. "Those are powerful enemies to make, Alexander Mikhailovich. They became my enemies the moment I stumbled upon their plan. I was supposed to join them. They approached me 4 months ago, but I hesitated. That hesitation saved my life because they proceeded without me, thinking I would eventually join. Instead, I began gathering evidence." A car engine rumbled somewhere above them, and both men froze. When the sound faded, Kovalev spoke again. "Why not flee the country while you could? Many of your counterparts have." Petrov's gaze hardened. "Because I remember Russia before Putin. The chaos, the poverty, the humiliation. Whatever disagreements I have with him, he restored our dignity. I will not stand by while ambitious men tear the country apart for their own gain." Kovalev studied him carefully. "You realize if I take this to him, and it proves true, the response will be severe." "As it should be," Petrov nodded. "Treason deserves nothing less. And your reward?" "Safety for my family, nothing more." Kovalev nodded slowly. "I will examine this tonight. If it warrants action, I'll establish contact with the Kremlin tomorrow. Until then, go somewhere safe." "There is no safe anymore," Petrov said grimly. "Just varying degrees of danger." As Kovalev turned to leave, Petrov added, One more thing, they plan to act during the Victory Day celebrations. 17 days from now. Without acknowledging the warning, Kovalev disappeared into the shadows, leaving the oligarch alone with his fear. The following morning, as pale winter light filtered through the curtains of his safe house on the outskirts of Moscow, Alexander Petrov watched the news with growing dread. The top story: Mikhail Kovalev, former deputy director of the Federal Security Service, had been killed in a single-vehicle accident on the Leningrad highway. The car had apparently lost control before crashing into a concrete barrier and bursting into flames. Petrov's hands trembled as he shut off the television. They had moved far more quickly than he'd anticipated. The conspirators had eyes everywhere, even on a supposedly retired intelligence officer. The flash drive was surely destroyed in the fire, a fire that was almost certainly no accident. He had no more moves to make. His evidence was gone, his potential allies were dead, and the plotters were closing in. The Victory Day trap would be sprung, and Russia would descend into turmoil. Unless Petrov reached for his phone and dialed a number he had memorized but never used. After 3 rings, a woman answered. "Da. I need to speak with Dmitry Nikolaevich," Petrov said, using the code name. "There is no one by that name here," the woman replied automatically. "Tell him it concerns the sleeping giant who wakes on Victory Day." The line went silent for several seconds before a gruff male voice came on. "Identify yourself." "Alexander Petrov. I have information directly concerning the president's safety. Critical information." "Hold." 2 minutes passed. Petrov paced the small living room, wondering if he had just made his final mistake. Then the voice returned. "A car will arrive in 15 minutes. Bring nothing. Tell no one." The line went dead. 14 minutes later, a black Urus sedan with tinted windows pulled up outside the modest dacha. 2 men in plain clothes emerged, efficiently scanning the surroundings before approaching the door. They didn't knock. Alexander Mikhailovich Petrov, the taller one, asked when Petrov opened the door. "Yes. Please come with us." There was no discussion, no explanation needed. Petrov followed them to the car, sliding into the back seat. Neither of the men spoke during the drive, which lasted nearly 2 hours, heading southeast out of Moscow. Eventually, they turned onto a narrow road that seemed to disappear into dense forest. After several more minutes, they approached what looked like an abandoned Soviet-era research facility, complete with crumbling concrete walls and rusted warning signs. The illusion of abandonment vanished once they passed through the main gate. Inside was a modern security checkpoint with armed guards and scanning equipment. Petrov was escorted through a series of increasingly secure areas until they reached what appeared to be a command center deep underground. Computer terminals lined the walls, and uniformed personnel moved with purpose between stations. He was led to a small conference room and told to wait. 20 minutes passed before the door opened again, revealing a face he recognized immediately: Sergei Viktorovich Chemezov, one of the president's most trusted advisors and head of the powerful state corporation Rostec. Behind him was Viktor Zolotov, commander of the National Guard and a man known for his absolute loyalty to Putin. "Petrov," Chemezov said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Explain yourself, quickly." For the next 30 minutes, Petrov laid out everything he knew about Operation Sleeping Giant. He described the meetings he'd been invited to attend, the fragments of conversation he'd overheard, the unusual financial movements he'd tracked, and the growing circle of powerful figures who had been recruited to the cause. When he mentioned Defense Minister Baranov's involvement, Zolotov's expression darkened visibly. "You have proof of these allegations?" Chemezov asked when Petrov finished. "I did," Petrov replied. It was given to Mikhail Kovalev last night. I'm sure you've heard what happened to him this morning. The two officials exchanged glances. Convenient, Zolotov said coldly. You make extraordinary claims against some of Russia's most important officials, but your evidence goes up in flames. I didn't come here expecting you to believe me on faith. Petrov reached inside his jacket, causing both men to tense, but he slowly withdrew a small notebook. These are the account numbers used to transfer funds for the operation. Dates, amounts, coded references. I memorized what I could. It's not comprehensive, but it should be enough to begin an investigation. Chemezov took the notebook, flipping through pages of handwritten notes. His expression revealed nothing. You understand, Zolotov said, leaning forward, if this is some kind of personal vendetta against your business rivals, or an attempt to curry favor after falling out of grace, the consequences will be significant. I understand perfectly, Petrov replied. I expect nothing in return except the safety of my family. My personal fate is irrelevant. Why not take this directly to the president? Chemezov asked. You've met with him before. My access was revoked after I criticized the new economic plan last month. And given how deeply the conspiracy has penetrated the government, I couldn't be certain which channels were compromised. What happened next shocked Petrov. Chemezov pressed a button on the conference table, and a hidden door in the wall slid open. And there, looking more tired than his public appearances would suggest but unmistakably recognizable, stood President Vladimir Putin. Petrov rose instinctively to his feet. Mr. President. Putin raised a hand, silencing him. I've been listening, Alexander Mikhailovich. Sit down. As Putin took a seat at the head of the table, Chemezov handed him the notebook. For several long minutes, the president examined Petrov's notes, his face betraying no emotion. Finally, he looked up. If even half of what you've suggested is accurate, we face the most serious internal threat since the 1991 coup attempt, Putin said evenly. But conspiracy theories are easy to construct and difficult to disprove. Why should I believe you? Petrov met his gaze steadily. Because I could have joined them, Mr. President. They offered me everything: increased market share, government contracts, protection from Western sanctions. I would have profited enormously from your removal. Instead, I am here, risking everything. Perhaps you simply backed the wrong horse, Putin replied. Perhaps you calculated the coup would fail and now seek to position yourself as the loyal informant. A reasonable suspicion, Petrov acknowledged. But there's something else you should know. The conspirators have acquired Novichok 23. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Novichok 23 was a classified nerve agent developed after Putin came to power, deadlier than its predecessors and virtually undetectable until it was too late. How do you know this? Zolotov demanded. Because they wanted my chemical subsidiaries to help transport it. They never specified what the substance was, but the handling protocols they described left little doubt. I declined, claiming technical limitations. Putin's eyes never left Petrov's face. You understand what you're suggesting? That the defense minister of the Russian Federation is planning to deploy a chemical weapon against his own government. Not against the government, Mr. President. Against you specifically. During the Victory Day parade. What happened next shook the Kremlin to its foundations. Over the next 72 hours, a silent but ruthless operation unfolded across Moscow. Acting on Petrov's information, security forces loyal to Putin began surveillance on the named conspirators. Communication logs were pulled, financial records examined, and travel histories scrutinized, all without alerting the targets. The evidence accumulated rapidly. Defense Minister Baranov had indeed authorized unusual troop movements scheduled for Victory Day. General Yegorov had reassigned several key military units with personal loyalty to Putin. Deputy Prime Minister Sokolov had drafted what appeared to be transition documents, disguised as contingency plans. Most damning of all, technicians discovered modifications to the ventilation system in the reviewing stand where Putin would observe the Victory Day parade. On the fourth day after Petrov's revelation, the president called an emergency meeting of the Security Council. Notably absent were the three main conspirators, each detained separately in undisclosed locations. When the remaining council members were seated, Putin entered without ceremony and took his place at the head of the table. "Comrades," he began, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made several officials shift uncomfortably. "We face a situation unprecedented in modern Russia. Evidence has emerged of a plot against the state orchestrated by individuals within this very government." A screen on the wall activated, displaying surveillance photos, intercepted communications, and financial records. For 30 minutes, Putin methodically outlined the conspiracy. No one interrupted. When he finished, the room remained silent until Nikolai Patrushev, Secretary of the Security Council, spoke. "What are your orders, Mr. President?" "Justice," Putin replied simply. "Swift and absolute. The primary conspirators will face military tribunal. Their accomplices will be given one opportunity to cooperate fully in exchange for leniency. As for the oligarchs who financed this treachery," his gaze hardened, "their assets are hereby nationalized. Their foreign accounts will be seized to the extent possible." He turned to the head of the FSB. "Alexander Vasilievich, you will personally oversee the interrogations. I want every detail, every connection, every hidden supporter exposed." "And the Victory Day parade?" asked the newly appointed acting defense minister. "Will proceed as planned," Putin said firmly. "Russia does not bow to traitors. The people will know only that certain officials have been removed for corruption, a partial truth. The full extent of this treachery remains classified at the highest level." As the meeting concluded, Putin asked Chemezov and Zolotov to remain behind. Once they were alone, he addressed them directly. "Alexander Petrov's information has proven correct in every verifiable aspect." "Indeed, Mr. President," Chemezov nodded. "The question remains, what to do with him now?" Putin considered this. He could have joined the conspirators. He could have fled abroad. Instead, he risked everything to preserve stability. Such loyalty deserves recognition. "With respect," Zolotov interjected, "he knows too much. The entire operation, our response, this facility." "True," Putin acknowledged, "which is why he will remain our guest for the time being. Comfortable, but secure. Once the situation is fully resolved, we will determine his future." What Putin didn't share with his advisors was the private conversation he'd had with Petrov earlier that day. The oligarch had made only one request beyond his family's safety, a request that surprised the president with its modesty. "I want nothing for myself," Petrov had said. "But Russia needs economic reform, real reform, not just reshuffling the same corrupt systems. The next generation deserves better than what we built in the chaos after the Soviet collapse." Putin had studied him curiously. "You surprise me, Alexander Mikhailovich. Most men in your position would seek personal advantage." Petrov had smiled tiredly. "I have more money than I can spend in 3 lifetimes, Mr. President. What I lack is a legacy I can be proud of." Now, alone in his office, Putin contemplated this unexpected development. Perhaps Petrov could be useful beyond his role as informant. Economic reform was indeed necessary, though not in the ways Western advisors had long suggested. Someone with Petrov's insight but renewed loyalty might be the ideal architect for Russia's next economic phase. But first, the traitors had to be dealt with. As Victory Day approached, a series of surprising announcements emerged from the Kremlin. Defense Minister Baranov resigned suddenly, citing health concerns. General Yegorov was reassigned to a remote military district in the Far East. Deputy Prime Minister Sokolov took indefinite leave for personal reasons. 7 oligarchs found their companies under intense regulatory scrutiny, with trading of their stocks suspended. To the outside world, these appeared to be typical Kremlin power shifts. Western intelligence agencies noted the changes but could only speculate about their meaning. Inside Russia, however, a clear message was being sent to anyone with similar ambitions: disloyalty would not be tolerated. The Victory Day celebrations proceeded without incident. President Putin reviewed the military parade from the fortified stand, surrounded by trusted security personnel who had personally inspected every inch of the structure beforehand. His speech emphasized unity and vigilance against both external and internal threats, a pointed reference that few in the audience fully understood. 3 days after the parade, a different kind of victory was celebrated in a secure Kremlin conference room. The conspirators had broken under interrogation, revealing the full extent of their network. Dozens of officials across multiple agencies were implicated. Evidence suggested foreign intelligence services had been aware of the plot, though their level of involvement remained unclear. Putin sat at the head of the table, reviewing the final report. So it's finished. The immediate threat is neutralized, FSB Director Bortnikov confirmed. The military units involved have been disbanded and reassigned. All compromised security personnel have been removed. And our guest? Putin inquired. Still in protected custody, Chemezov replied. His family has been moved to a secure location as promised. Putin nodded thoughtfully. Bring him here tomorrow. I've made a decision regarding his future. The next morning, Alexander Petrov was escorted into the same conference room. He looked better than he had a week earlier, rested, properly dressed, though still carrying the wariness of a man whose world had been upended. Putin dismissed the guards, leaving only himself and Petrov in the room. You have done Russia a great service, the president began without preamble. The conspiracy has been dismantled. The plotters will face appropriate consequences. I'm gratified to hear it, Mr. President, Petrov replied cautiously. Your family is safe, as promised. Now we must determine your role going forward. Petrov's expression revealed his surprise. My role? I assumed I would be retired from public life, one way or another. That would be wasteful, Putin said. You spoke of economic reform when we last met. Your critique of our current system was harsh but not entirely without merit. He slid a folder across the table. Petrov opened it to find a proposal for a new government commission on economic modernization, with his name listed as chairman. This is unexpected, Petrov admitted. Russia faces challenges that require fresh thinking coupled with unwavering loyalty, Putin explained. You've demonstrated both. This commission will report directly to me, bypassing the usual bureaucracy. And my past criticism was delivered in private, not public. I don't require sycophants, Alexander Mikhailovich. I require competence and patriotism. Petrov studied the proposal carefully. These powers are significant. As are the expectations, Putin countered. You will face resistance from entrenched interests. Many who profited under the old arrangements will oppose you, including some of your closest allies. Putin's smile was cold. Former allies, in some cases. Recent events have clarified where true loyalty lies. Petrov closed the folder. If I accept, I would need certain guarantees. Transparency in implementation, protection from political sabotage, resources appropriate to the task. All reasonable requests, Putin nodded. Do we have an agreement? For a moment, Petrov hesitated. He had expected many outcomes from his decision to expose the conspiracy: exile, imprisonment, even death. Rehabilitation and promotion had not been among them. Was this genuine opportunity or merely a more sophisticated form of control? In the end, the choice was simple. Outside this room lay uncertainty and danger. Within Putin's orbit, there was purpose and protection, conditional though it might be. "We have an agreement, Mr. President." They shook hands, sealing a partnership born of conspiracy and survival, one that would reshape Russian economic policy in the years to come. 3 months later, Alexander Petrov stood at a podium in the Grand Hall of Moscow's Manege Exhibition Center, addressing Russia's business elite. Behind him, a large screen displayed the logo of the new Commission for Economic Sovereignty and Development. In the front row sat President Putin, watching attentively as his newest advisor outlined a vision for Russia's economic future. "For too long, we have relied on models not suited to our unique position in the world," Petrov declared. "Neither Western capitalism nor Soviet planning, but a distinctly Russian approach balancing state priorities with entrepreneurial energy. We will build an economy resilient to external pressure, leveraging our natural advantages while developing new strengths." As he detailed specific initiatives, technology investments, reduced bureaucracy for strategic industries, reformed tax structures, Petrov caught glimpses of both enthusiasm and concern among the audience. Reform always created winners and losers. Some of Russia's most powerful figures were realizing they might fall into the latter category. At the reception following his speech, Petrov found himself approached by a senior American diplomat. "Quite a remarkable turnaround in your fortunes, Mr. Petrov," the American said quietly. "Last I heard, you were on the verge of disgrace. Now you're implementing economic policy." Petrov smiled politely. "Russia values talent and loyalty, Mr. Thompson. Sometimes one must experience adversity to demonstrate both." "There are rumors," the diplomat continued, "about certain changes in leadership positions. Unexpected retirements, reassignments, even a few unexplained disappearances. Personnel matters are handled according to Russian law," Petrov replied evenly. "I focus solely on economic development." Thompson lowered his voice further. "My government would be interested in better understanding recent events. If you ever wish to discuss your journey back to favor, we would ensure your future security." Petrov's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. "You misunderstand me, Mr. Thompson. I am not seeking alternative arrangements. And this conversation is over." As he walked away, Petrov noticed one of the president's security officers watching the exchange with interest. Within hours, the American diplomat would receive notice that his presence in Russia was no longer welcome. Later that evening, Petrov was summoned to the president's residence outside Moscow. He found Putin reviewing economic data on a tablet, surrounded by reports and briefing papers. "Your speech was well received," Putin said without looking up. "Though I noticed certain elements seemed uncomfortable with your proposed banking reforms. Those who built fortunes exploiting regulatory gaps will naturally resist closing them," Petrov replied, accepting the offered seat. "Thompson approached you at the reception." It wasn't a question. Petrov knew better than to be surprised by the president's awareness. He suggested I might wish to share information about recent personnel changes. Putin set aside his tablet. "And your response?" "Was clear and negative. I don't require American protection, Mr. President." "Good." Putin nodded. "Because unlike our former defense minister, I honor my commitments to those who honor theirs." He gestured to a nearby aide, who placed a folder before Petrov. Inside was a deed transferring ownership of a substantial property in Sochi, previously belonging to one of the oligarchs implicated in the conspiracy. Your new southern residence, Putin explained. Suitable for family gatherings, perhaps retirement someday. The previous owner no longer has use for it. Petrov recognized the symbolic weight of the gift. Not just property but property seized from a traitor, marking both reward and warning in a single gesture. Thank you, Mr. President. This is generous. It is earned, Putin corrected. Now, tell me your thoughts on Chinese investment in our technology corridor. Their ambassador was quite persistent yesterday. And so the partnership continued, a pragmatic alliance between the ultimate political survivor and the oligarch who chose country over conspiracy. In the years that followed, Russia's economy showed remarkable resilience despite continuing Western sanctions. Petrov's commission implemented reforms that strengthened state control in strategic sectors while liberalizing others, creating a hybrid system that puzzled Western economists but served Russian interests. The full story of Operation Sleeping Giant never reached the public. The military tribunals were conducted in secret, the sentences undisclosed. Occasionally, Western intelligence agencies published analyses suggesting an internal power struggle had occurred, but without confirming details. 5 years after exposing the plot, Alexander Petrov attended another Victory Day parade, this time as an honored guest on the reviewing stand. As military hardware rolled through Red Square, he caught Putin watching him momentarily. Second thoughts, Alexander Mikhailovich? The president asked quietly. Petrov shook his head. None, Mr. President. Russia is stronger now than before. More independent. More resilient. Thanks in part to your economic reforms, Putin acknowledged. Though not everyone appreciates having their comfortable arrangements disrupted. Reform always has costs, Petrov replied. The question is whether the benefits outweigh them. And do they? Petrov gestured toward the display of Russian military might proceeding before them, then to the crowds of citizens watching with evident pride. I believe they do, Mr. President. For Russia, if not for everyone within it. Putin nodded, satisfaction evident. A truth many fail to understand. Individual fortunes rise and fall. Russia endures. As fighter jets roared overhead trailing smoke in the colors of the Russian flag, Petrov reflected on his journey, from wealthy businessman to conspiracy target to trusted advisor. His choice to expose the plot had altered not only his own destiny but possibly Russia's as well. Whether history would judge that alteration positively remained uncertain, but one thing was clear, the sleeping giant had been neutralized before it could awaken. And in Moscow, at least for now, power remained exactly where it had been. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe to FictionWire Russia. This is a fictional story created purely for entertainment.